Hi, this is Rufus Opus, and we're here with BJ Swayne. Um, Welcome to Applied Hermetics. We're going to be talking today about the uh, social imperatives that are implied by ancestor work, a topic that BJ came up with, and we're going to explore some of the different ways that we are responsible to um, the ancestors and what that implies for us as living people today, and how we reach out horizontally with that, with our society and our culture and things like that. So, and the environment and whatnot. So, without further ado, BJ, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here today.
Yes. So, what made you think of this particular topic? What inspired your interest in this?
Well, I've been kind of outlining some stuff on writing about places that magic and the occult community need to go as they continue to move forward and continue to develop. And was also looking at some writing about ancestor work specifically, and not just the magical end of it, but the more spiritual and cultural end, like looking at how the relationships work, looking at touch points for those relationships, looking at holidays and customs and things along those lines. And one of the things that seemed to be a topic that related to both those ideas of where magic needs to go as it becomes something that's more about a way of life and less just an activity for magicians, and which is, I think, when we look at cultures that have living traditions of magic, that's an important difference between how magic was for the Victorian magicians in the Anglosphere and the magicians influenced by them. For
Right.
them, magic was a leisure activity. It was something you did on top of everything else that you were doing. Whereas for communities where magic is part of survival or it's part of the normal day to day, it's something that's integrated into social awareness, integrated into just your consciousness regarding how life is lived, how the world is set up, and how you engage everything else. It's part of the rest of your existence. It's not something that's this separate, weird, fringe thing that you think
Right.
separately.
You're gonna have
And
to.
so,
I'm sorry. There's an echo in the.
well, I was going to say, so for us to move forward into having something closer to that kind of living culture of magic, we need to begin to expand it out beyond just here's a curriculum of study and here's some ways to dress candles to get stuff we want, and look at how magic informs the rest of how we live our lives and
Right.
the rest of how we understand the world. And that kind of ties into that same idea of how do we engage our ancestors and how does that impact how we should be engaging the rest of life and the people around us and the environment around us and those who aren't even around us yet, those that are still going to be coming after us.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. The ways that we're trying to um, like my daily podcast I've been doing lately. It's to reach out to people and try to get them to integrate, magic as a daily practice and think about it every day a little bit. What does my hermetic magic look like today? Every day it's something about the planets and whatnot, because I think, like, I agree with you that we need to make magic a way of life, and I think it's fascinating that seems to be, like, if that's the core theme of applied hermetics, then I think that I'd be very happy if that was everything else was a branch of that. Getting
Yeah.
people to do the thing. So
Mhm.
anyway, but yeah, this is sounding very interesting. Cool. So what kind of obligations or actually you were talking about finding different parts of the year and places as touch points to work with the ancestors.
And I think that's one of the things that when we look at it as something that's not just a matter of, okay, I'm going to go to my ancestors and ask for help with things occasionally, or I'm going to call on my ancestors when I'm doing some sort of magical work. When ancestor veneration or honoring or acknowledging your ancestors becomes a normal part of your life, then it's going to be something you're doing routinely. Like, for instance, I have a photo of my father when he was a little boy and then another one of him as an adult, which my grandfather put together for me. And that is right by my door as I come into the house. So when I leave or when I come in, I can say hello, I can acknowledge him. My ancestor shrine is also in my dining room. It's in the first room as you walk into my house. And so in order to go anywhere in my house, I have to pass by my ancestor shrine. So whenever I come in from being out somewhere, I can stop, acknowledge my ancestors, thank them, talk to them for a moment. So it's something where it can be woven into your daily life, not just as something that you are doing when it's some special time or when you have some special need. I've seen some people talk about how it's something, well, you should do this once a week, and that can work as a schedule. But if we look at a lot of traditional cultures, there's some connection to the dead, some connection to your ancestors that's built into your home and is part of your regular daily life. And your regular daily life isn't once a week or once a month; it's your daily life. So I think that's a way that you don't necessarily have to like light up your shrine and make offerings and everything every day. That can be something that you're doing weekly or monthly or whatever cycle makes sense for you and for the spirits you're working with, whether they're your ancestors or whether they're other spirits that you have some obligation to. But having something where there's that daily touch point, that daily reminder that's right there, where they're part of what's central to your experience, is something that I think is useful and is also healthy. I think that's something that we lose in Western culture. We try to put the dead away. We try to not think about death because for most of us it's something that's unsettling because there's so much uncertainty, there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much sadness around the idea of loss because in most of modern Western culture we think of death as an end rather than as a transition or process of healing and moving into some new phase that's part of a cycle. And I think when we begin to understand death as a transition and as part of a natural cycle, and that those who are dead are not gone, they're continuing just in a different way, where we can still approach and interact, then that gives us something where we're able to have a bit of a healthier relationship with the world around us and with the inevitability of death, and also with our memories of those that are gone. When we take that to the next step, where we take that consciousness that the dead are still there, then that also necessitates that we have points where we have ways of remembering them, we have ways of interacting with them. And so having things that we do customarily for certain days or certain points that were important to us and those deceased people that we knew or that were important to our families, that's a way in order to keep that connection and make that connection something that is living and vibrant for us, which I think again is part of a healthier way of dealing with the concept of death and understanding death, and engaging those who are not necessarily physically present but are still there in some way. Taking that to a cultural context, that's when you start to have things where you have special holidays that connect with the dead, days where we're in parts of the year where it's easier to make those connections, or where there's some sort of shift seasonally or shift because of some sort of historical occurrence that people believe makes it easier to contact the dead or makes it so that there's some reason to be contacting the dead on those days. Personally, I've found it useful to look at Roman uh, customs for that, as well as some Greek customs for that, just because those are things that are very accessible to us as Westerners. Also, because I have an academic background as a classicist, but so it makes it easy for me to look at those things because I have numerous resources on that from going to school and then continuing that education afterwards. Explore and find that may have meaning for them. Even within our own culture, we have as our own culture, as in American culture. I'm sure you have listeners that are not Americans, and so their cultural occurrences may be a little bit different than ours. But within the United States, obviously, we have Halloween. We have Memorial Day. We have Veterans Day. We have um, Patriot Day, So depending on what different categories people may have fallen into, then there are days of remembrance for the dead as well already. But we can kind of expand those out and look at different days and different customs through those historical cultures that also influence and inform us. Now, I think that's one of the things that's kind of one of the first easy steps into making this something which is more woven into people's lives. The idea of having holidays or having special occasions where we can do these things, it becomes something that people are able to kind of pattern and build things around. They're able to look forward to. They're able to sort of focus and plan for. But I think the next step after that is as we begin to understand that the dead are still people, and they're still people who are still there and have some interaction with the world or desire for interaction with the world, and still have desires and goals and things that concern them, then if we are partners with them in the magic that we're doing and partners with them in the work that we're doing to shape our worlds and our lives and our experiences, then we have to look at how that partnership works on our end for them as well as their end for us. So it can't just be, I'm going to pour you some whiskey and light some candles and incense and say hello from time to time, and you're going to help me get a new car, or you're going to help me avoid some life disaster, or you're going to help me get over being sick. We've got to look at what their interests are as well, and look at how we shape our interactions with the world based on that, because we're part of a community with the dead at that point, and they are also through us part of the communities that we're part of in the world. And so that's where we start to get into how there are social imperatives with dealing with ancestors.
Okay. So how does that look for how does that look when you're trying to fulfill those obligations? How do you find out what the ancestors are expecting from you? What their interests are? How do you know about that type of thing from them?
I think I got the question there. Your audio was kind of dipping out,
Oh,
but
I'm sorry. Do you want me to repeat it?
you were asking how we know, basically, right?
Yeah, basically. How do you know what's going on with the what their interests are in our relationship with them as practitioners and participants, right?
Okay, I think there's a couple ways to look at that. One, the answer that a lot of magical teachers have been kind of trying to get people on board with and understanding and recognizing the last several years is that when we're dealing with spirits, whether it's the dead or gods or angels or demons, that yes, they do have an ability to speak with us and inspire us, and we can develop our awareness so that we can hear them, we can see them, we can get sense impressions or receive inspiration or have visions or dreams where they connect to us. But there's still a level of us having to trust that we've got that awareness fully honed and that we really know what's going on there, and it's not us creating some inner voice and telling us something that we want to hear. Part of that I find convenient with the dead, when we're dealing with dead people that we knew, they retain some element of their own voice. And I don't mean in the sense of like we know the sound of them, but there's going to be some way in which they communicate where you can kind of pick up the feeling that, okay, this is how they would say that. This is something they would say, as opposed to this is what I want to hear and this is what my own inner voice sounds like.
Yeah, so that's actually something I had a question about.
Mhm.
How projection while people are alive is a big deal.
Yeah.
We often interact with people and think that we're seeing things that aren't necessarily there. How much harder is it when they're dead?
I mean, I think it can be a lot harder, but I think if you try to come into it in a state where, I don't want to say humble, because I feel like we use humble as this virtue to prop ourselves up.
Mm-hmm. Humble brag.
And right. And I think that there's a state of, I guess, calm and receptiveness where you recognize that it's not just about you, and you try to get out of the way a little bit to kind of take the Doctor Strange movie idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can just kind of listen. Then you'll start to recognize that there are points where there's stuff you're getting told that isn't what you want to hear. And there's going to be times where you're told things that they're lessons that might be important for you, or they're things that you might need to do, and they're things that they just don't kind of suit who you are, who you think of yourself as, because they're things that are important to those people that you're talking with. My father is often the main ancestor that I kind of focus on talking with, as kind of the representative for the rest of my ancestors. And there are definitely things where in life he and I disagreed about how to interact with certain people, how to interact with certain situations, and what the focus on something should be. And there's definitely times where what comes through to me as inspiration suits what his position or his opinion would have been, or what he would have told me to do. And there are things where I'm like, I very much don't like looking at it that way. I very much don't want to do it that way. And so there's not that element of wish fulfillment of, okay, yeah, they're telling me that I'm on the right track or that I want to do it this way. There are times where you mess up, like where you don't do the things that are expected of you, and you're going to go and ask for help with stuff, or you're going to go and just talk with them, and they're going to bring that to you and tell you, hey, you need to be doing these things. Like this is part of what you need to be doing. This is part of what your responsibilities are. Like, get back on this.
Mhm.
And sometimes those things can come through pretty clearly. Just because it's something that you don't necessarily like hearing doesn't always mean that it's coming from someone else, though. There are times where we tell ourselves things that we don't like hearing also. So it's useful to have some means of divination, some sort of tool that you can use to kind of verify communication, verify the things that are being told to you. It could also be useful to look for things happening in and around your life
Back up
that
what you're
confirm.
saying.
Yeah, like I had a thing the other day where I was planning acknowledgments for a book and was thinking about listing the first ancestor spirit that I dealt with as a child, who was very helpful to me, as one of the first acknowledgments. I was thinking about what I would say for that. And then the next morning, uh, there was a priest from a tradition that deals with ancestral spirits who reached out to me, and I'd actually been thinking about him in the process of doing some ancestor work the day before as well. And he reached out and said that when he was doing his daily devotions that morning, I crossed his mind along with the question of, who is your primary ancestor?
Mhm.
And so the question that came to him to give to me as a message definitely dealt with the things that I was looking at regarding my ancestors the day before. So sometimes you'll have little things like that where it kind of confirms that, okay, what you're looking at or what you're thinking or what you're feeling or hearing or seeing connects with what's actually there, because you're getting it confirmed in other ways. And that's also the point of what the divination is to confirm that in some other way. um, I think that that idea of knowing what they want, it can be something like that where it's specific that they're communicating it to you. I think a really neat example of that from the historical record is Bessie Dunlop, who is written about in one of Emma Wilby's books. She was a witch in, I think, Scotland,
Mhm.
who, rather than making a pact with the devil or encountering a fairy and making a pact with a fairy, she encountered the spirit of a deceased person. And that person would guide her through and teach her magical remedies and things along those lines, and give her advice and explain what was going on with people that came to her. But that person had unfinished business in their town, which I think was like the neighboring village or something along those lines. And so after he had helped Bessie for a while, Bessie had to help him and went over to that village to take care of whatever it was that he needed, that was left behind regarding his family. And so I think that's a good way of illustrating how that can work on a very specific basis, that there
Mhm.
might be some particular thing that a particularly deceased person needs. And they will sometimes communicate that individually to us. But I think there's also more global concerns that our ancestors will have as a group. And that those tend to deal with things like, how are we treating our family? How are we treating the people around us in the community? How are we treating the world around us? Because we often look at the ancestors and say, hey, they are really good spirits to go to because I think it was Chris Bradford who said they have skin in the game.
Right.
A very literal sense, because we are that skin. So they have concern with us because we're their family and they want to see us do well. They want to see what they've put into the world continue and prosper and grow. And when we think about family, we have to remember that family is not about self. Family is not about selfishness. Family is about the collective. It's about a group. It's about everyone together being part of a continuum. And so when our ancestors are concerned with us because we're their family, that means they're concerned with our aunts and uncles. They're concerned with our cousins. With if we have grandparents that are living, they're concerned with them. Parents that are living, they're concerned with them. They're concerned with our children, with our nieces and nephews. And that goes beyond just us, because when we start looking back several generations back, um, I mean, most of us, when we honor our ancestors, we're going to be looking at ancestors a generation or two back, maybe three, with those people that we knew in life, or people that our parents or grandparents told us about who were special to us because of stories we heard. But as we explore family history, or if we have stories about family members from generations ago that have been passed down, we may also have ancestors that we recognize from further back. So in the ancestors that I recognize by name, one of them is like 11 generations back. And so when we look at that, that means I'm going to have a ton of people who are also descended from that person who really have no familial connection to me in any meaningful way. And we're going to have a lot of ancestors that are like that. One of my friends and I were talking the other day. He's not a magician, but we spend a lot of time together, and so he's very aware of the magic stuff. And so he was kind of musing about that idea and questioned how far back we'd have to go before we found common ancestors. And it's something that, yeah, a lot of the people we're dealing with day to day who aren't our family, we may not know of common ancestors we have with them. We might not be able to find common ancestors. At some point, there was one.
Right.
So there's people, if we go far enough back, that we can say everyone has some genetic link to one woman and one man at some point in history. Uh, we're not necessarily going back to mitochondrial Eve and in order to look at our ancestors, but the breadth of our community is going to have connections that way. And so when we look at our ancestors' concerns, we can't say they're just concerned with us individually. They're just concerned with our immediate family. There's going to be some general social concern. And so we have to look at it as something where we're part of a collective, we're part of a community. And that responsibility to our ancestors implies that we have responsibilities to their memories, their concerns, things they left behind. We have responsibility to how people remember them, how we treat what was left to us by the dead, how we treat the memory of the dead. But then we also have to be concerned with how we're treating, how we're protecting those who are still around us, both in our families and beyond our families. And then we have to look at how we become ancestors and what we leave behind, and how we ensure things for those who are going to come after us, whether it's our children or our nieces or nephews or our cousins' children. And part of that, I think, also then carries out to looking at how we treat the world around us and the environment around us.
Right.
I think one of the concepts that really encapsulates this relationship is a Bantu concept, Simba Simbi, which means hold up what holds you up. And I write about it a fair amount in Living Spirits. Um, my ideas on it are influenced by um, the work of an African writer who wrote an essay, Simba Simbi, which you can buy on Amazon. It's very, very short. It's like maybe 8 pages long, so you're paying like $1 a page to buy it, but it's still a good read and it's still interesting. He also talks about the concept in um, he has a book on the cosmology of the Bantu Kongu people. I should have pulled it out so that I could remember his very long name and the actual name of the book. But I'll try to send it to you if you do show notes, so you can include it there. But again, it translates to hold up what holds you up. And there's a lot of ways you can look at how that translation works. But the idea that what supports you, you have to support also. And that becomes a cyclical idea that your ancestors support you, so you have to support your ancestors. You support your children, so your children support you. Your
Right.
parents support you, so you support your parents. And that begins to spread out to the whole community where there's a symbiosis of support. And when we look at that beyond just people, the world around us, the environment supports us. It gives us food, it gives us nourishment, it gives us air. So we have to support that as well. And if we're going to be concerned with our descendants in a broader global sense, then we have to be concerned with the world that we're leaving for those descendants as well. I think you've known me long enough to know that I'm not exactly a progressive, but I think regardless of what our politics are, that kind of social awareness and that kind of stewardship, which if we're looking at things that are conservative, Catholicism very much embraces the idea of stewardship of the world and stewardship of the citizens of the world and the actual environment that makes up the world itself. It's hugely important. It's one of the first things that is commanded to anyone in any of the Abrahamic religions. And so that's something where I think we need to begin a process of looking at that through the occult community and through the lens of the lessons that we learn,
All
the
right.
experiences that we have, for how our work and our magic needs to be about that global support of those around us and the context in which we live, and how that support is in of itself an offering to those who came before us, as well as an offering to those who will come after us.
Mm-hmm. When sorry, I just got a distraction there. When you talk about this within the culture, I mean, we know a lot of people in
Mhm.
common, and we have our own circles of people that aren't in common that we interact with daily. Um, a lot of the people that are drawn to the occult are drawn to it. I mean, there's a large number of people that have issues with their families, and I was wondering how that impacts your interactions with your ancestors, because a lot of the things that you're talking about doing with the ancestors are things that like I couldn't do with my parents, and I have a great relationship with them compared to a lot of our friends with their parents, you know. And how does that personal, because a lot of families have a lot of strife and stress within them, does that also translate into the ancestor work? I mean,
I think that's a really interesting way of looking at that question, because people frequently ask about it in the sense of, is it okay to curse, to, to use like profanity?
yeah, oh
Yeah.
definitely.
So people often look at it and are like, hey, I have some really shitty ancestors. Like, I have some people who did really shitty things and I want nothing to do with them. And I think there's kind of two ways that we can look at that issue, where you're going to have some ancestors that just had like shitty elements of their personalities and did some crap things, but that's not necessarily who they were.
Hmm.
That you just maybe had some bad experiences and kind of rubbed each other the wrong way a little bit. And when we look at death, we have to look at death as a process of healing. The body gets sick and gets infirm through death, but as that health and that vitality and that wholeness are leaving the body, it's adding to the spirit that passes on.
Hmm.
And so some of those things that were a little incomplete or a little bit wonky, they start to heal. And some of the trauma that they had that made them into people that were maybe less cool to be around, some of that heals, and you get to deal with some of the better parts of them, some of
Oh,
the
that's
parts
good.
that weren't as twisted and messed up. You get some people that are just kind of shit people.
Uh-huh.
Like, and I hate saying that because I think everyone has a core of goodness that is the center of them, and that's the true part of any person, but it's not the only part of any person. There's more to people than just that. And when we die, it's not that everything gets erased and it's just that core goodness that's the initial spark of us that's left. There's still parts of who we actually were. And some people, they've just got things that are so deeply messed up that dying isn't going to heal all of that.
Oh,
Uh,
dying's not good
the
enough for him.
Yeah, like and I don't think that's going to be the case for most people that we don't like. I think most people that we don't like, there's probably going to be elements where we don't understand the full picture of them. We don't understand their full background. And there's things because of baggage they have. And that's the stuff that can be healed. And if they had the right experiences in life, it could have been healed in life too. But it's a lot harder there. But I'm not going to throw out that there's not examples where people are just beyond that, where they're still going to be kind of crummy when they move on. And so maybe we don't have to individually engage those crummy people. I think there's also going to be an element of some people did horrible things to us, and we're not going to be able to move past those things. And maybe those things are not things that we should have to move past. And so trying to honor or venerate them as ancestors is not something that's fair to ask of us. We're still human. We still have our experiences as human, and those experiences are valid and important. And some of those experiences are not great, and they're not things that we should have to relive or have to deal with. And that's okay. You've got a ton of ancestors. And even if you don't know the names of all of them, even if maybe the ones that you do know the names of are people that you don't want to connect with, you can still kind of connect in a general sense. And if you have trouble thinking of that as something that you can connect to generally without having to name people, there's probably people that were important in your life who helped you develop, who have moved on, or there's probably people who you've inherited the product of their ideas and the product of their work, who influenced communities that you're part of, or influenced your career path, or just not necessarily your specific career path, but the industry in which you work, or ideological systems to which you adhere. And you can honor and recognize those people. You can find people that are not necessarily your blood ancestors and recognize them as well. Now, when we look at your question, which I think is interesting because it's not really the part of this that anyone ever asks, what if your living family is shitty?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if you can't deal with them? And if part of working with your ancestors is dealing with their interests in life, and your living family is one of their interests in life, how do you navigate that? I think that's just like navigating interactions with anyone else.
Right.
Sometimes people are going to want things from you that are just not okay for them to want from you, or to expect for you to do. You can still have a relationship that's reciprocal, because there's going to be other things that they need and other things that they want, that you can fulfill and that you can do, and they can be things that are ways for you to bond and grow together. And so if your living family is just off the table, or there's living family members that are just off the table, then maybe you've got other extended living family that you can deal with, that you're more okay with. Maybe it's about cultivating the next generation of your family. Maybe it's about giving to your community and working with people in your community. Maybe it's about helping the environment around you. Maybe it's going and tending to graves and taking care of the places where the dead are remembered. There's lots of different things that you can do in order to live those responsibilities and live those commitments. It doesn't have to be one specific thing. I think for some of us, when we look at that, and there's that question of like, hey, I've got a decent relationship with my family, but I couldn't necessarily go do these things with them. It's not necessarily that you have to go and celebrate some festival of the dead with your family, or that you need to bring them in and have them honor your ancestors at your ancestor shrine, although those are great things, and I frequently get from my ancestors that they would like me to kind of pass that along. But some families, it's just not going to be what they're okay with or what they're going to be on board or comfortable with. And some of it's stuff where, okay, maybe you can kind of work in little bits of awareness and consciousness about the dead as people that continue with us in small ways, where it kind of opens things up for them a little without necessarily being in their face about it. But it doesn't have to be that. Maybe it's just you call your parents, you call your grandparents, you call your aunts and uncles, and you talk to them about your life, talk to them about their lives, and let them know that they still got a connection with you. Maybe it's when your siblings need help with something, you're there and you provide that help. Maybe it's you teach lessons to your children or to your cousins' kids or your siblings' kids. It's just being a part of that community that your family looks to. It's being that elder, even for your elders, maybe, where
Yeah, when they're not quite elders themselves.
yes, like you can be a source of support, you can be a source of guidance, you can be a support source of help or comfort. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is in their face spiritual. It can be something that's just you're present, you're part of life for them. And yeah, there's going to be some people where their family situations are sadly just traumatic and unfair to them, where it's not right to ask them to do that. And it's sad that the world has that in it, and it would be nice if situations were better for everybody, but we have to acknowledge that that's not the case, and we can't expect that people need to feel pushed to do those things if it's just not healthy for them. But there's always other things that they can do. It's not something where, hey, you're going to be letting your ancestors down. You can't do ancestor work if you can't have a relationship with your mom and call your mom and deal with her. No, some people's moms are awful. But maybe you've got an aunt or an uncle that you can have a relationship with, or maybe you still have a living grandparent. Maybe you have cousins. And if that's not the case, maybe there's somebody else in your community that needs you.
Right. I was just going to ask you about that. What about the family? So, and within the occult community, there's a common thread, I think, amongst my friends that the family that we are born into isn't really the family that we find as we go along. So I'm assuming that all the things you're talking about apply to your friend group too, because like I'm closer to you than I am to my sister. Just from camaraderie and shared experiences and this ongoing conversation that we've had for over a decade now. It's I haven't talked to my sister as much in the last 10 years as I've talked to you. So I mean, you and I are and that's just an example, right? I mean, obviously it's obviously one it's the obvious example in the room. So but like being able to help out your friends and stuff, is that did the ancestors push you towards that too?
Yeah, I think it's something where it's the less immediate part of that awareness, the less immediate part of understanding that. But again, those other people around us that are not our blood relatives, at some point they have some connection to their ancestors, and their ancestors have some connection to our ancestors. And at some point, those ancestors are probably shared on some level. So we can kind of look at our global human family. And so we can look at our responsibilities not just to the people that we immediately think of as our blood family, but the people that are in our community, whether it's a chosen community or it's the community that we live in, whether it's the community that's immediately surrounding us, or it's a community where we're linked to people across the world. I think it's something where a lot of the Western worldview is baggage. It's stuff that we need to kind of evaluate and say, is this really how it is?
Right.
And when we say that only our blood family is our family, or only our blood family is important, or this is the most important thing, that's clearly not how the world works for us.
Right.
It's not what our actual lives are in practice, and that's for everybody, not just people who don't connect with their families well. everyone has things where they have responsibilities and they have connections that are important outside of just their families. And when we put this valuation in place that says that only this is important and everything else is this different thing that's not as important, and if we only have that as something that's important to us, then we're doing something wrong, or there's something that's not right in our lives. That's not really fair, and it's not really practical, and it's not the way that a large part of the world looks at it. So I think it's very fair to say that our chosen family, or those who are in our community who need us, are people that we can look to as people that we can support, and in supporting them we can find our own support as well. In my own life, as you're aware, I do a lot to take care of my blood family, and it's something where I frequently recognize that there's probably other things I could be doing, but that's also just who I am, and everything. I'm always like, there's other things I could be doing.
Right.
But I also have all the kids that I coach,
Mm-hmm.
and the college kids that I coach. And so it's something where I try to be as present for them as I can. And I try to give to them as much as I can, as far as being able to give them advice and guidance and pass knowledge to them, and be someone who is support, be someone who is not necessarily a role model. I mean, that is part of what it is, but it's not about that. Like, being a role model, there's something to that that can be kind of selfish a little bit, because you want that feeling of being somebody that people are able to model after. But rather being someone who is a source of resilience, someone who provides some good space, and who is able to provide help and able to provide kind of a steady presence that shows that there are people that are going to look out for you. There are people that are going to care for you, in addition to just the people in your family. There's people who are going to give things to you, that are going to give their time to you, beyond just those people in your family. Because I think that's important for people to understand, in order to shape a community where
Yeah.
people do things like that.
So that we can learn to trust one another.
And for me, that's with the fencing, that's very directly kind of an ancestral obligation, because I picked up running my youth program when my coach passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and I took over running his youth program that he had started, and continued various traditions that he had created, with the boys that were there, and had been sort of in a big brother role for the group of boys that were there already, and so was the person that they kind of collected around
Mm-hmm.
as a source of guidance to help them be able to continue what they were doing when they were dealing with this trauma that is very unexpected for any group of middle and high school kids to have to deal with.
Right.
And then that became something that stuck and continued growing to a much larger group of children beyond that group. So I think that's something where we can all look for ways to give to our communities and give to people in our communities, without being stuck on the idea of just, are we giving to our children? Are we giving to our parents? Are we giving to our siblings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to what you were just talking about there, when you stepped into the role as the coach, the replacement, not the replacement, the uh, receiver of the lineage, if you would, right? The person that carries on the next step and tries to fill the shoes of the previous person. Do you feel like you're the coach that had passed in like as your ancestor? Do you think he's been helping you like that? Because like I've been in situations like that where I felt like I was supposed to step forward, but it
Mm-hmm.
was social obligation and not something that would be fulfilling for me personally, and that I wouldn't be very good at doing. You know, like if I were to try to step in as a fencing coach, it wouldn't work at all. Even if I see something that and somebody actually expected me to do it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, something like that, it just isn't me. That I'm not good at. But for you, it was something that you were already good at, and you were the logical choice. But did you also feel like because I'm thinking about how the ancestors work with you when you're doing something for them, and how they're part of the operation. Even, you know, you don't leave them at the altar when you leave the
Mm-hmm.
house, you know what I mean? So do you feel like your coach was sort of part of that too, or am I off base on how that works?
No, I think so. There was definitely, I had a sense that it was the right thing to do, that it was something that I should be doing. And this was before I had really gotten into heavily focusing on ancestor work or had much of a real sense of it. I think for a lot of people, it's easier for us to understand the concept of working with ancestors as we start having people close to us pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And then it is if we haven't really had much of that experience. And up to that point, I hadn't had a lot of that experience. And then suddenly my father passed. And then a little less than 3 months later, my coach passed. And so it was a lot all at once. And so it was a very formative year. You recall that was the 2 years where I kind of dropped out of the magical community. And
Right.
like one of the first things I did at the end of that year was to perform a catabasis ritual to go and speak with my father. And that's actually a central element of the book on necromancy that I'm writing right now, is talking about preparation.
Can you explain what catabasis is?
Catabasis is a journey into the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
And so talking about the preparations for that and things that people can go through in order to connect with the underworld and the gods and spirits of the underworld in order to gain that kind of access, and then also to find ways to bring that kind of necromantic work into this world as opposed to having to always go into the underworld. And I've talked with a handful of people about that ritual, and yourself included, when I did it, and then a few times afterwards, having talked about it. But one of the things that I don't usually bring up is that while I was in that I guess trance is the word for it, in order to journey into the underworld, after I spoke with my father, I sought out my coach to speak with him also. And then there were times where I asked him for guidance through dreams on how to coach things, how to understand, how to do things beyond just what I had been taught by him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think beyond just those elements, there were also elements of things that were happening in life during that time that helped kind of me understand that, yes, this was how it was supposed to be. This is what I was supposed to be doing. As much as I can be someone who thinks highly of myself and thinks that I'm pretty skilled at things or good at things, I often don't think of myself as a person that other people recognize that in. And I also frequently question my own capability and my own rightness for things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably why sometimes it seems like I kind of sit back a little bit, even if I'm doing a bunch of stuff otherwise. With the fencing, for a long time, it was like I'd been coaching the college, but I still didn't necessarily look at myself as somebody who was adequate as coach. In fact, when I put together the curriculum that I used for the college, I was like, okay, by the time someone's done this curriculum, they should be about a beginner and be able to enter like the basic levels of competition. But I had people midway through the competition, midway through the curriculum, who were getting ratings into Division I levels and able to go compete in regional events and national events. And I knew a lot more than I realized I knew. And in that year or so, as things were starting after coach passed, I kind of did that same thing of I sat back and I helped out and I didn't take the reins, and kind of struggled with recognizing myself as somebody who was capable of doing that. And then there were other people in the community who had known coach and had known me and had seen him do his lessons with me, seen him work with me. And they came to me and pointed out, like, hey, all the kids knew you were the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, coach had you working with them while he was still alive. They all knew to come to you once he passed away. Other coaches in the area were calling you because they knew where you went, those kids would go. And it was something that other people recognized, even if I didn't recognize it.
Right.
And there were multiple people who came and told me that and explained that to me. And the kids themselves eventually cornered me at an event. We were doing like a cookout and camp out, and before I told them that they all had to go to bed, they they pulled me aside and they were like, look, you should be the one that's teaching us. You should be the one that's doing all this stuff. Coach taught you. Coach showed you how to teach. Coach prepared you for all of this. And we know you don't feel like you're necessarily ready to do it all or to take it over, but you're the one that was supposed to be doing this. You're the one that we need doing this. So it was sort of like the other descendants telling me like, hey, pick up the reins, take the mantle, do this.
Right.
And I think that that's something where, as I was trying to explore those things and unpack those things through my own spiritual explorations, then I had people in the community, in the world, also coming to me, helping me explore those things and unpack those things, and realize that, like, yes, this is what he wanted. This is how things are supposed to be.
Right.
As far as maintaining that connection, his family is involved with running the club also. And so we have like almost like this shrine where we have this giant portrait of him up, and we have his medals and his military honors and his Hall of Fame plaques and all of that up in the center of the back wall. So as soon as you walk into the club, you can see it. We have like his team jacket from when he represented the USA in
Oh, that's cool.
an international masters competition hanging up from the ceiling. And so it's something where that memory is always present. And it's been interesting passing that memory on to people that didn't actually know him, where the kids know, oh yeah, that's coach's coach. That's the coach that started the club. That's the guy that ran everything in fencing in the area for a long time. They can answer trivia about him when we do trivia games sometimes for them to get little bonuses for things. And I've had college fencers who've been like, man, I really wish I could have gotten to know him, because it's something where when you're doing that work in a community that someone was important to and part of, even if you're not like spiritually connecting people to the idea of connecting with their ancestors and the people that came before them, you're still keeping that memory of that person alive.
Right. And what's the difference then between that and making that spiritual connection?
I don't
You
think
know, I
there
mean,
really is one.
ultimately, right? Yeah,
Like,
it's just
yeah.
it just becomes like you were saying, it becomes natural practice. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think that's a great example of the ancestor work in practice. You know, it's rubber and road right there.
Yeah, I think sometimes we need to kind of break a culture a little bit and not always think of things in like the idea of the occult as this separate hidden thing, and just think of
Right.
things as life and as what
Exactly.
is.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I really want applied hermetics to do. With at least, you know, 3 or 4 people. If I can influence 3 or 4 people to see things just a little bit more like you do, that would be great. You know?
Well, hopefully we can work together and help build that community and serve all those that came before and all those that'll come after us that way.
Yeah, yeah. I've noticed like we're sort of an age. I think you're still younger than me a little bit, but you're catching up. I mean,
Someday I'll be the same age as you.
yes, exactly. Sooner or later. But it's fun to go through all this stuff with you because like I feel like we're as I mean I consider us the same age, but I feel like as we get older, you know, we are merging into this uh, paternal or avuncular at least, you know, person for that next generation. And the way you took ownership over that with it as a coach, you know, it's something that it is inspiring. You know, one of the names of Hermes is the leader. You know, and it's like um, being a leader is part of being a hermeticist. You go first and you make way for other people, but you know that imposter syndrome thing, it's a real thing because you've got the imposter syndrome and Dunning-Kruger effects like competing at the same time. So you either think that you know everything or you think that you don't know anything, and somewhere in between you find out along the way that yeah, you actually have been through all this and you are right. And you know that confidence that kind of grows. I think that definitely has to be coming from some form of ancestor thing. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know. But it is pretty neat. Well, um, I'm gonna go ahead and call it there. We can probably talk for hours, I'm sure. But thanks for
Yeah.
joining us today.